Miss Diggums, I'm gonna need you to calm down. Oh, hi, Pepper. Say hello to everybody. Cutie pie. Pepper is just sitting here with me as I get my shit together and start recording this video. You know what? Why am I doing this without lip gloss? Like, how can I allow myself to be seen without sheen? I don't know what this looks like, but if my lips look fucked up, they look fucked up. Can we talk about something? So the other day I logged onto Twitter and I saw something that annoyed me. I've come to expect that from Twitter, honestly. No, it wasn't yet another example of my rights being taken away. It was a hot take from Logan Paul, which in my opinion is just as bad. Logan Paul, like a handful of people, didn't really seem to like Jordan Peele's new film, Nope. And honestly, for me personally, it was one of my favorite films of this year. So of course I felt some type of way. Now, before I get into this video, I want to say that everyone is entitled to having their own opinion about films. It doesn't have to be for everyone. Not everyone has to like it. You don't have to like it. There's some stuff that Jordan Peele has created that I haven't been super into, but I really enjoyed Nope and I'm pretty passionate about it. And honestly, I just kind of wanted an excuse to talk about it. So I thought that I would go through Logan Paul's tweets about the movie and have a conversation with you about Nope. Yes, this video will be full of spoilers, and no, I do not care. You've been warned. Okay, so let's start out with the first tweet. Logan Paul says, Nope is one of the worst movies I've seen in a long time. I love Jordan Peele and Keke Palmer can act her ass off, but this movie is objectively slow and confusing with stretched themes that don't justify the pace. A thread. Now, I'm gonna try to say this in a way that doesn't sound too disrespectful. And I don't know if it's gonna come out the right way, but I personally feel like there are some people who watch movies as background noise. And what I mean by that is they don't really watch movies to be enveloped in the world, to really have conversation, to really question themselves, to challenge themselves, to think. It's just kind of like passive entertainment. And I think that that's valid. And I think that a lot of people probably struggled watching this film because it's not a fast-paced action movie. It's not a movie where things are constantly in your face happening all the time. I'm sure if you went into this expecting it to be an alien movie, you probably were excited about all of the various aliens and sci-fi things that are going to happen throughout the movie. And that's not really what this movie is. It is one of those movies where you really do have to pay attention to everything. There's a lot of things that are said in passing or little details of things that you really have to pay attention to, or you might miss the entire story, I guess. If you're watching it passively, you're probably not going to fully enjoy it. There are themes throughout the movie that do connect really, really, really well. In fact, one of my issues with Logan Paul's response to this movie is that I actually, after watching the movie, kind of felt like it was almost too neat, right? In my personal view, it was like so neat, so together, so everything. Hey, girlie. Sorry. Pepper is trying to get my attention. Hello. Hello. I love you. Ain't she daddy? Anyway, ambiguity is something that I actually really appreciate in a horror movie or a sci-fi film because a lot of these films are kind of about humanity and our existence, right? Specifically, alien invasion films are interesting to me because a lot of it is a repositioning of colonization. You usually are telling a story about an alien species who's coming to Earth to settle and the terror that is required in that. How oftentimes these alien species have to clear out the planet before they settle, right? And that's something that feels very alien and very far away and very scary, but it's also a very real thing that a lot of people have experienced historically. I think that a lot of this movie is its subtlety. A lot of this movie is a portrait of a very mundane environment where not a lot of things are actually happening, where the fact that not a lot of things are happening really sets the tone for why something so great and so exaggerated and so scary could happen and be such a big deal. One of the things I actually really liked about the movie is that its sound design is incredibly important it's a character in and of itself. The sound design tells such a story. And Jordan Peele is really great with music, and the music in the film is really, really great. I say all that to say that this is a genre of film that really does require you to think. And I know that some people don't necessarily want to do that when they're watching a movie. Again, I think that movies don't have to be that for everyone, but I definitely think that's the kind of person this movie is for. All right, let's go back to his tweets. He says, "It's not hard to conceptualize something disturbing. A trained chimp goes animalistic and mauls an entire set, or a UFO devouring anything in its path. It is hard to sensibly tie it to a plot, which was done remarkably poor here. A series of questions. Spoiler alert." All right, so one of the reasons I wanted to make this video is because when I got to the end of the movie, I was like, wow, I really appreciate the various different ways in which the same story was told over and over and over again. But then the person behind me said that the monkey part had no point, said that the monkey part had no purpose. And I kind of understand a little bit how you can initially feel that way, because the first scene that we see in the movie is of the chimpanzee going on a rampage. And we don't really understand yet how it exactly fits into the film. So the movie starts on the set of a sitcom. The sitcom is about a family who adopted a chimpanzee named Gordy, and they're all presenting presents to him on his birthday. One of the presents that he receives is a box full of balloons. And once the balloons fly up into the set and pop, that triggers Gordy to go on a violent rampage. Gordy kills everyone on the set except for the two children in the movie, the little boy and the little girl. Unfortunately, the little girl is essentially disfigured beyond recognition, whereas the little boy survives. Steven Yeun's character is named Jupe. He is the child star from the sitcom, and it's very clear that he hasn't really done a lot of acting since he was a child. You see from the fact that they have a reality TV show on TLC that he is in a position where he is struggling to hold on to what he has. Jupe purchased this Western-themed theme park, and he themed it after himself, and he's in the process of putting together a new live show. It's very clear that he's putting a lot of stock into the show. He's very excited about the show, and his desperation is something to really keep in mind as the story develops. Daniel Kaluuya's character OJ belongs to a family of Hollywood horse trainers, and we see in one of the early scenes that he is trained to take care of the horses on set. And one of the horses on set, named Lucky, is this horse that has a very sort of stubborn way of being. One of his main triggers is that he doesn't like for people to look him in the eye. Daniel is doing this job for the first time without his father, and he really isn't confident about what he's doing, so he doesn't really speak up about the safety. His sister, Keke Palmer, aka Emerald, comes and kind of gives this very self-serving presentation of the safety protocols, which don't include the fact that you shouldn't look Lucky in the eye. And of course, somebody takes a mirror, pulls it around and shines it in Lucky's face, and Lucky kicks back. Unfortunately, that accident got them fired. In the beginning of the film, OJ's dad passes away, and it's clear that since he's passed on, it's really been a struggle for him to keep the farm together. So he's actually started to sell some of the horses, which really isn't something that he wants to do, but it's something that he has to do right now financially. OJ decides to sell Lucky to Jupe with the understanding that one day he will purchase him back. Jupe needs Lucky for the new show that he's putting together called the Star Lasso Experience. Now, I'm gonna actually ruin a pretty significant part of this film just to prove this point. Like I said, hella spoilers in this video. No, I do not care. But one of the things that they try to figure out throughout the film is what exactly these UFOs are. At first, they think it's a ship, but they realize that it kind of moves a bit too quickly for it to be a ship. Once OJ gets a closer look at the UFO, he realizes that it's not a ship, it's actually a wild animal. Now, before he made this discovery, he observed one of the UFOs eating one of his horses the night before. So he puts two and two together and figures out that the Star Lasso Experience is basically Jupe feeding the horses to the UFO. Once he comes to this realization, he rushes over to rescue the horse, but unfortunately, the show has already started. Around the same time that OJ realizes that the UFO is actually an animal, he also realizes that it only consumes things that look directly at it, similarly to his horse, Lucky. The UFO comes to the stage and begins to suck up everybody in the audience, everyone except for Lucky, who of course is stubborn and kept his eyes down, didn't look up, and subsequently was not consumed. It's clear that because Jupe survived the chimpanzee attack, that he somehow has convinced himself that he has like a special touch that makes it so that animals trust him more. He doesn't understand, though, that similarly to the horse and similarly to the UFO, one of the big things that kept him alive is that he never looked Gordy directly in the eyes. You kind of see in the way that they shoot from his perspective that his eyes were actually covered while Gordy was walking towards him. And if they weren't, the insinuation is that he might have also been murdered. So I can see how all of these different things don't seem connected, but these are all several stories of a person trying to tame a wild animal and that wild animal becoming primal. Animal trainers tried to train Gordy. OJ tries to train horses. Jupiter tries to train the UFO. And all three animals had a trigger that made them go primal. So I can see how these all seem like they are very disconnected from each other, but this is just several different instances of the same thing repeating over and over and over again. So yes, the theme that binds these things together is very much present. Additionally, the UFO doesn't consume everything in its path. Like I said, it only consumes things that look it directly in the eye. Anyway, this is his first question. 1, no one was curious how a quarter shot through a man's face and killed him, or why a key was lodged in the backside of the horse he was riding. All right, so this is a great example of not exactly paying attention to all of the little things, because on the set that OJ's on, the director is having a conversation with an assistant, I don't know who he's talking to, about why OJ's father isn't there. And one of the things that he mentions is that the excuse that they've given for why he was killed by a quarter that fell from the sky is that it was debris that was dropped from a plane. What we learn later is that the UFO essentially consumes all biological matter and then rejects everything that isn't. So in the very beginning of the film, there's this hailstorm of metal. And the reason why there's a hailstorm of metal is that the UFO is rejecting everything that isn't biological. And this is actually a pretty important part of the story, because understanding that the UFO does that is actually how they ultimately end up defeating the UFO. Question 2, why/how did the shoe stand upright on the set of Gordy's home? This one I'm sure has a reason, but I haven't found anything that makes sense. So I did not understand this originally either, and then it was explained to me, and now I think it's brilliant. So in the film, you see while Gordy is attacking people on the set that there is this shoe standing very, very upright, almost in a very unnatural way. I believe it belongs to the sister on the show. And what I didn't get at first is that this shoe standing upright is supposed to represent the phrase, the other shoe dropping. I don't know if people use this phrase a lot, but it's a phrase that usually has to do with waiting for further bad news, right? Waiting for something really, really bad to happen, something worse than what currently is. And Jupe, sitting under the table, waiting for Gordy to attack him, was like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? He was waiting for something bad to happen to him. And if you watch the movie, you know that the shoe ultimately does not drop. And he keeps this shoe in his office in the theme park because it's such an important artifact to him. It is a representation of his survival. And in a lot of ways, the UFO consuming him is the other shoe dropping. Right? I didn't really get it at first, but like now that I understand that that's what it's supposed to represent, it's brilliant. To me, it's one of those things where like, this was an example of something happening in a movie that was more metaphorical than it was literal. And I kind of really enjoyed that now. Of course, it didn't exactly make sense to me at the time, but to me, it becomes really amazing looking at it again. Okay, number 3. Deep-voiced cinematographer was cryptic for no reason other than to be cryptic. You're telling me that this guy was willing to die because he wanted better lighting to capture the ET for real? So, okay. Like I said, I watched this movie twice, and I do remember feeling like this character was over the top on my first viewing. On my second viewing, not so much. There's a character in the film, I don't remember the name of the actor who plays him, but he has a really, really deep voice, and it's a very particular voice, and he is known for being the cinematographer that captures the impossible, specifically with animal photography. And Keke Palmer's character Emerald contacts him to help get footage of the UFO because she wants to sell footage of the UFO. That's kind of what a lot of this movie is about, them trying to get footage of the UFO so they can resell it, right? Which they ultimately do, but they try a lot of times and it does not work. But this is a character that is supposed to be funny, right? The thing that's interesting about this film is it does have its funny moments, but it is not a comedy. I think a lot of people are used to Jordan Peele doing comedic things, and obviously he does put that in a lot of his films. But this was an example of a character that is supposed to be funny, a character that's supposed to take itself too seriously, right? This guy, all he cares about is getting the good shot. All he cares about is getting the impossible shot, to the point where the way he dies is that he allows himself to be taken by the UFO, and he's sitting there cranking the film while it's happening, all so he could get a better shot. This is supposed to be a representation of an artist that takes himself far too seriously. I think that it's a difference in sense of humor, because I laughed when I saw it the first time. I laughed at this character when I first saw him. He's very serious, but he's very silly. Some people believe that the reason why he ultimately killed himself essentially was because he was terminally ill. I didn't really see that on my second viewing. I probably missed that detail, but yeah, the character's supposed to be ridiculous. That's the point. Number 4, same note, man on the motorcycle. Why was his voice so deep and robotic? Framed to be an antagonist who'd have a grand reveal. Mystery solely for the sake of mystery is confusing and leaves too many open ends for a viewer trying to invest themselves in a storyline. So there's something kind of funny to me about Logan Paul specifically not understanding this character, because this is a character who is supposed to represent a media spectacle and the ridiculousness of it all. So this is a character who appears on an electric motorcycle. He is wearing this like big reflective helmet, and he is from TMZ. At least that's what Emerald says. He's from the media. He's there trying to get the dish. This happens right after Jupiter's entire audience is consumed by the UFO, and people are starting to ask what's going on. People are starting to look into it. This is a character that is supposed to be funny. One of the things that the UFO does is knock out all the electricity around it, and this guy runs in on a electronic motorcycle. And so there's a point where he's trying to rush towards the UFO, and of course it stops and he goes flying. And when he goes flying, he lets out a really, really high-pitched yelp, which of course contrasts to his very, very deep voice. It's supposed to be funny. And even when OJ walks up to the guy and is like, "Are you okay? You know, do you need help?" or whatever, he asks, "Did you get that on camera? Did you get that on camera?" Even as the UFO is standing right above him, about to take him away, the only thing this guy can ask is whether or not OJ has a camera to take footage of what's going on, right? And a big part of this film is a criticism of the spectacle of it all. That's a really huge aspect of it. I believe that Jordan Peele stated it was about. And it's funny watching this, because I feel like if the UFO did indeed come to Earth, that is what people would mostly spend their time doing. Putting their phones up, getting their cameras out, and taking pictures of it instead of, avoiding it. Because by this point, OJ's like, we need to get you out of here. But the only thing he can think about is getting footage, getting images for the media. The ridiculousness is the exact point, right? It's supposed to be over the top and ridiculous. Now, I didn't see the other trailer, so I don't know if the way that they presented this character was that he was supposed to be an antagonist, but frankly, if they did, I think that's funny because this character lasts, I kid you not, for like 4 minutes of the entire movie. Okay, question 6. Jupe has trauma with the phenomenon of commercializing predators for profit, and for the last 6 months, he's been feeding horses to an ET in the sky. But what about before that? What was the purpose of that creepy cowboy theme park? Now, this is kind of how I knew that Logan Paul wasn't really closely listening or watching this movie, because they mentioned pretty immediately that Jupe has only owned the park for 3 months. It used to be something called Rodeo Corral or some shit before it was what it currently is. He decided to take on this Western themed theme park because he was in a show when he was a child that was a Western. And that's where he gets the name Jupe from, because Jupe was the character on the show. And that's why he owns a creepy cowboy themed theme park. He has the theme park because he's struggling, right? That's why he's willing to do something so desperate like make an agreement with an alien to have a new show. I just want to add a little bit of an addendum here because I really think that this point is important to point out. Steven Yeun's character Jupe is also incredibly arrogant. He's arrogant because he survived, because Gordy mauled everyone with the exception of him. And this arrogance that you see in the film of him deciding to work with a UFO whom he has literally no reason to believe wouldn't kill him is an expression of the fact that he just felt like he was so special, so important, and nothing bad could possibly happen to him. He loses his entire family, his entire audience, and his life because of his arrogance and because he wanted to capitalize on the spectacle. It's very clear from that scene that he has no control over it. There is no sort of relationship that he had with it. In fact, the UFO comes earlier than it's supposed to come. And I just think it's a really good way of sort of showing that this idea he had isn't a true idea, because he has no control over it. Even in the end, he tries not to freak out, but I think he realizes that his day has finally come, and unfortunately he dies. Love Steven Yeun to death. Sad that he had to go that way. Jupe did not have experience commercializing predators. He had experience with trained animals going wild on set. That's what he has experience in. So those were the tweets that I found the most objectionable, right? A lot of the other stuff he said I kind of agreed with. He mentioned that Barbie Ferreira was underused in the film, and I kind of agree with that a little bit. Barbie Ferreira plays a character that is essentially just a Fry's employee who has 1 or 2 scenes. And, you know, could she have done more? Sure. I don't know where she would have fit. I think it's pretty cool that she had the role. I don't know. He also made a comment about Jordan Peele using chapters that were named after the horses. I didn't really get that, really. I didn't really understand what that was about. I think it was just a Jordan Peele doing a Jordan Peele kind of thing. You know, I don't think that it really made or broke the film, but it definitely was random. But I don't know if it's really something that was distracting enough to like ruin the film and make it the worst film he's ever seen, right? Ultimately, I really enjoyed the movie. I don't think everyone has to like it. I also think that it's not necessarily a film that everyone would like, but I thought that for what it was a really, really good movie. And I really, really enjoyed the very clever way, in my opinion, that all of these various stories were woven together. I just thought that it was pretty brilliant. Like I said, in my personal opinion, I thought it was a really clean, tight script. I don't think that there was really any time wasted. I can't really think of things that could have been subtracted from it, really. I wanted more, honestly. I think that's part of why maybe some people didn't fully get how things connect, because a lot of the stuff that I saw were probably things that could have had 1 or 2 more scenes to clarify. Do you know what I mean? There are just certain, character building things that probably could have been stronger, but all in all, I didn't really have an issue with it. Honestly, I've read some of the reviews of this movie, and it's clear to me that a lot of people didn't really get this movie. So hopefully, if some of these things I talked about were confusing to you, you might understand it a bit more. I think if you haven't seen this movie, you should go see it. I'm sorry if I ruined it for you, but you were warned. So anyway, I am really trying to get better about posting on here. I'm sorry that I haven't seen y'all in like a month, but I will hopefully not make that a pattern. Anyway, on that note, I will see you guys next time. Bye. What are you doing? Hi, booba. I love you.